Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
Yeah, I gave myself all sorts of excuses, at the time. I'll be like, I'll just, stick it out for a little bit more. I'll make my money and get out and et cetera, et cetera. But it's very difficult to have an exit point, especially when things are going well.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator, where we focus on human connection and what brings us together. I'm Moshe Popack, and I just had a fascinating conversation with David Packouz, who was the subject of the film War Dogs. He's a former international arms dealer turned entrepreneur and inventor. We chatted about his incredible life, everything from gun running to staring death in the face to his latest invention, which seeks to revolutionize the way we floss our teeth. Before we play the interview, a quick reminder that if you like the show, please subscribe and follow me on social media at @mpopack. Now, here's my conversation with David. Enjoy. Hi, David.
Hey, how you doing, Moshe?
Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Take us back to, you're working as a massage therapist, right?
Yes.
And somehow you become an international arms dealer.
Yes.
And the film War Dogs is basically based on that story.
Yes.
For the people that didn't see the film, tell us a little bit about high level, I guess, what actually happened, because Miles Teller played you in the film, and you're you, so you know exactly what had happened.
Yeah, so I was 22 at the time, and I was working as a massage therapist. I was also studying chemistry in college. And I had a few other side businesses. I was importing SD cards from China, selling them on eBay. I was doing all right, I was also buying bulk amounts of bed sheets and towels from Pakistan and selling them to nursing homes in the United States. That part made it into the movie, though. And I bumped into Ephraim, who I had met in synagogue when we were kids. He had been working for his uncle in L.A., and his uncle owned this big pawn shop, and one of the things that pawn shops sell is guns and ammo. And his uncle was bidding on local and state police contracts to sell them, bulletproof vests and handguns. And so he learned from his uncle how to bid on these government contracts. And then he had a falling out with his uncle. They each claimed the other screwed him. Who knows? I'd believe both of them, And Ephraim came back to Miami and started his own business and started bidding on federal contracts. And this was in 2004, right after the invasion of Iraq. So there were these massive contracts because the United States pretty much bombed Iraq and then tried to rebuild it from the ground up. And they had to supply their local police and army in the process of building Iraq up as a country. And so there were these massive contracts. And Ephraim started winning them, and he started doing very well. And then he asked me to join him in the business because he needed a partner. And I was already doing some international business with the bed sheets and the importing of the SD cards, so I knew how the international logistics system worked. I didn't know anything about guns. I'd never actually been into guns and never owned a gun. I was a musician, so, more of like a hippie type of character than anything at the time. But he convinced me to join him, and we started working on those contracts together. And within about 8 months of starting to work with him, we won this massive contract. It was a contract to supply the entire Afghan National Army and Police with all their munitions. So that's everything from pistol ammunition all the way up to anti-aircraft rockets and everything in between, tank shells. So it was just a massive contract. I believe it was the biggest small arms contract in history as far as at the time.
Because I always think about Lockheed Martin.
Yes.
And so practically, how could somebody, like an independent, right? Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, right?
Yeah.
How does it actually work?
Right.
Because they seem to usually no bid or have the expertise. So how did that actually work that you won that bid?
So that's a good question. So the way the government works is that when they want to buy something, they are required by law to get the best possible deal for the taxpayer who's footing the bill. right? So if there are multiple suppliers for an item, they have to put it out for bid. Now, if they're going to buy, a stealth bomber or a nuclear bomb, there's only one company that makes that, so they have to do a no-bid contract to Lockheed Martin or to Halliburton or to Raytheon or whoever, for that specific item because they're the only ones who make it. And usually those kind of items, those kind of contracts, they do what they call a cost plus. Which is why the government overpays on everything, because they pretty much cover the cost that the company incurs plus a small amount of profit. So, it's a terrible incentive. The company has an incentive to jack up the price as much as possible because then their percentage is more money. But for competitive bids, for no-bid contracts, things more of a commodity nature, such as small arms ammunition, which there's hundreds and thousands of companies that manufacture this, they put up a request for proposal on their website, and they say, these are the items we want. We want it delivered at this place at this time. These are the quality requirements, et cetera. And then everyone who's interested, who has the capability of delivering, they submit their bids to the government, and the government decides who's got the combination of the best price, delivery time, reliability, have these people done this before, et cetera. And they take all these factors into account, and then they decide what is the best value to the government as far as all these factors go. So for this particular contract, it was all Warsaw-packed munitions because the Afghans and the Iraqis, they don't use NATO standard. They use Warsaw Pact standards, which is, the old Soviet Union,
right.
Was running on. And, that's what their personnel are trained on. And it also, bonus for the U.S. taxpayer, is way cheaper than NATO standard. And the U.S. Army wanted to spend as little money as possible, in this endeavor. So there aren't manufacturers in the United States that make this stuff. So anyone who's going to be supplying these munitions would have to get it from foreign suppliers, either as new manufactured goods or as surplus goods from various military organizations that have this stuff stored up, or even private companies that have bought it up and stored it up. So there's huge amounts of old Warsaw Pact munitions, left over from the Cold War because, they were expecting this massive world war and were arming themselves up for it, but it never came. And so there's a lot of this stuff available. So our role in this was finding all the different suppliers of these types of munitions and finding the most efficient logistics system of getting from where it was to where they needed it to go, to Kabul. And we came in way lower than all our competitors, and we were told by about $53 million lower than the next.
Right, I remember that in the film.
Bid. Yeah, that's a real number. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So was it actually in Albania where you located the munitions?
Yeah.
Is that?
So Albania was where we located the AK-47 ammo, which it's interesting because our story is mainly known for that ammo, and that was the highest. That was the biggest part of the contract as far as logistics went, but it was the smallest part of the contract, or one of the smallest parts of the contract as far as value goes, because the ammo was very, very cheap, but it was many airplane loads to get it over there. But for example, one aircraft filled with grenades was worth more than 10 aircraft filled with AK-47 ammo. So the AK-47 ammo, 7.62 by 39, that was coming out of Albania. But we had many other sources of supply for the other items on the contract.
They have this Department of Defense. It's about $800 billion a year.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think about 80 billion of that is this kind of dark budget.
Right.
Right. So is that you were working with Department of Defense, so I always wonder, just from a personal level, any idea, is that money spent by the CIA, NSA, things that are just confidential? What's the idea there?
So I was not privy to, you know, the flying saucer base or anything like that, unfortunately, as much as I would have loved to. But no, the things that we were working on were all stuff that was posted online for anyone to see. You know, it was all open public bids. So it wasn't like anything top secret. One thing that I did find interesting, though, through that work is that you know, just by looking at what they're looking to buy, you could kind of read between the lines of what the government, what the military is doing. So, for example, at the time, we saw there was a big contract to set up like, you know, to supply a military base in Chad, right, in Africa. And there was nothing in the news about Chad, right, until like 6 months later. Then suddenly there's all these like, you know, military operations going on there. But if you had looked at the contracts that they were, you were like, oh, they're gearing up to do something over there. So, you know, there's a lot of public information available that you know, people who are interested can see just by, what the government posts publicly. They don't necessarily tell you the details of what they're doing, but you could kind of read between the lines. Now, as far as like 80 billion of dark money, I have no idea. You know,
right?
I don't know what
it was an interesting point. But another fascinating thing. Yeah. When I assumed that you did, you know, sell some arms. You know, there was a scene there in the movie where you went to Iraq, right? And you're getting paid in cash. Right. Did that actually happened?
They never do that.
They never did. Right. So there wasn't this stack, right? So like 12.6 billion of cash that they confiscated by Saddam Hussein. Right. That didn't happen.
Okay, so let me rephrase that. They do pay people in cash, but only as far as I know, the local contractors in Iraq. You know, so they're the people who were doing local work on the ground, you know, in Iraq and in Afghanistan were paid with cash. And they did confiscate Saddam Hussein's, you know, cash reserves. I mean, you can say they confiscated the whole country. But as far as most, you know, federal contractors go, you know, people who are bidding on, publicly posted, open bids on the government website, on the Federal Business Opportunities website, that's all paid by check or by wire. And that's only paid 30 days after you deliver. So, you know, they're very, very careful with, you know, who they pay. And, you know, they have to make sure that, you know, the people, the receiving officer inspects the goods and it conforms to the requirements of the contract. And then he signs off on it, and then 30 days later, if you're lucky, you know, you'll get paid. Right. Yeah.
And it seemed a couple times in the film, were you actually in reality ever in real physical danger? Did that?
Not in the way they portray in the film. I was never kidnapped. I did not drive through the Triangle of Death in Iraq. A lot of people are disappointed to hear that, but that story actually did happen, but just not to me. Or to my partner. It happened to the screenwriter, the guy who wrote Stephen Shen. He wrote the screenplay for War Dogs. Before he was a Hollywood screenwriter, he was a war correspondent, and he was just getting into the job at the time in 2003. And of course, he wanted to cover the war in Iraq, but couldn't find a flight into Iraq. There were no flights, so he flew into Jordan and hired someone to drive him into Iraq, and got shot at by insurgents and got saved by the army. And that whole thing actually did happen, but it happened to him. So the director, Todd Phillips, was like, "We need more action in this movie. Why don't you put your story in there?" So that's how that story got into the. There was a Beretta deal that is based on the truth, but it didn't happen like that.
But you know, I think that life is a funny thing, and I always go back to the point of the podcast, common denominator, and I always want to highlight the stories connect us. What would you say is a great life lesson from that part of your life that you can reflect on and share to the audience?
I learned a lot from that time in my life. It was one of the most exciting and stressful times of my life. I would say that the biggest lesson that I took away from there is be very careful about who you work with, because your work is your life, you know, a huge part of your life. And for a lot of people, it's the dominant part of their lives. And if you're working with someone that you don't enjoy working with, or that you have problems working with, or you don't agree with their decisions, you're kind of swept along and you kind of become more like that person. You become like the people around you. And so just like, you know, everyone, you know, I'm sure everyone's parents tell them, you know, be careful who your friends are, because, you know, that's who you're going to become. You know, in our adult lives, it's be careful who you work with, because that's who you're going to become. And if, you know, you have a partner who's, you know, doing questionable things, then you get swept along with it. And yeah, I gave myself all sorts of excuses, you know, at the time. You know, I'll be like, oh, I'll just, you know, stick it out for a little bit more. You know, I'll make my money and get out, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's very difficult to have an exit point, you know, especially when things are going well, right? Because then you just want just a little bit more, just a little bit more.
Like, I know my main business is real estate investment, and I really resonate with what you just said. You know, I have, you know, we had some good success, and I've had through the years. You talk about people, connecting with people. I've had some partners, investors that I've worked with, and I made them a good amount of money, and not that I needed it, but there wasn't even a word of a thank you or a gratitude, and I made a conscious commitment that, to your point, that to be careful who I surround myself with, because again, you don't even realize it subconsciously.
Yeah, exactly.
You become more and more like them. So be around better people.
That is a great takeaway.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on a moving forward basis, how has that like materially changed you, that experience today? You know, you're a father, right? How old is your daughter now?
She's 15.
So I know I'm a father of 10, right?
Wow.
Yeah, right?
You got me beat there.
Yeah.
got my one and only.
It's complicated. Actually, my oldest son is here in the studio. Mendy right here. Shout out to Mendy. And how is that experience, like, you know, as your daughter's getting older, and what would you say as a parent? You know, she sees what you grew up with, and how is that in your conversations with her? I'm sure she just grew up with it, but how is that as a father with her?
So I mean, I think that the most important thing any parent can do is to lead by example. And you know, they say don't do as I say, you know, don't do as I do as I say, right? But in reality, all children do as you do, not as you say. You know, they see what you do, they see the kind of person you are, and either whether consciously or subconsciously, they emulate that. So it's, you know, super important to live the life and the values that you want your children to lead as well. You know, that's critical. The funny thing is, at least as far as my daughter goes, is she has, maybe it's the age or something, but she's been absolutely, completely uninterested in the whole War Dogs story. She kind of vaguely knows it exists, but she has zero interest to actually watch the movie. And she's never like actually asked me any questions about it, though she like knows it exists. So, you know, I think maybe it's just because it's always been there for her. And, you know, like to her, it's kind of just like weird. She knows me as her father, and like there's this like kind of Hollywood story out there that, you know, isn't like who she knows, you know. So I'm in no rush for her to get into it. You know, I'm happy that, you know, the way it is, you know, that she can take her time, and you know, whenever she wants to ask me about it, obviously I'm for sure, you know, more than happy to talk about my experiences.
Today, I guess the creative side came out, and you are an inventor.
Yes.
So tell us about Beat Buddy. And I guess was that your first invention, or is that your because I know you have other inventions. Tell us a little bit about Beat Buddy.
Right. So Beat Buddy is my first invention that actually happened.
Right.
My first invention, if you could call it that, was a perpetual motion machine when I was 8 years old. Never worked. Goes against the laws of physics. But I've always been, kind of dreaming up gadgets. I've always loved technology, and my dad always encouraged me. He bought me like a little invention book that I could, write my childhood diagrams in it. But the way I came up with Beat Buddy was actually after the whole War Dogs thing happened. I was sentenced to 7 months of house arrest. I was very, very fortunate that I managed to avoid prison time, and I was under house arrest and playing a lot of guitar. I've been playing guitar since I was 15, so I was entertaining myself. And I really missed playing with a drummer in particular. I missed playing with musicians in general because I was locked at home, but a drummer in particular because the drummer gives the beat to the music. The beat is the energy. You dance to the beat. But of course, no drummer's going to bring his drum set over my house because that's a massive pain. And anyway, it'd wake up my entire apartment building, and I couldn't go to the studio. So I bought a drum machine, which is a tabletop electronic device that is mainly used to compose beats. It's got a lot of buttons on it, and each one makes a different drum sound. And you can make beats on it, and it plays it back in a loop, and so you can play your guitar to the beat loop. And so I bought one of those, but I realized that the beat doesn't do the same thing the entire song. When you go from verse to chorus, usually the beat gets harder. There's like little fills that get mixed up, to mix up the beat. But every time I wanted to change the beat, I'd have to stop playing my guitar, press a button on the machine, go back to playing my guitar, interrupted the flow of the music. So I thought, I really need a drum machine that I could operate hands-free that's in the form factor of a guitar pedal. So I went online. I was sure someone already made it because to me it was just like an obvious idea. Right. And I went online to look for it, but I couldn't find anything like it. And I asked my musician friends, and they hadn't seen anything like it either, but they all wanted one too. So then I realized, well, if nobody's making it, but everyone wants it, this could be, my first actual, creation. So it took me 3 years, but eventually got the right team because I'm not an engineer. I studied 2 years of mechanical engineering, but that's not nearly enough. You need an electrical engineer, you need a software engineer and a mechanical engineer, and as well as an industrial designer and all these things. And I didn't know any of this because I'd never actually brought a product to market. So it was a lot of trial and error. Hired some bad people, had to, fire them, find new people. It made the classic mistake that everyone makes of going with the cheapest person first. Then I learned my lesson, and then I went with the person who seemed like they knew the most. They weren't even the most expensive, but they had the most details. They seemed like they knew what they were talking about. And after 3 years, finally got a fully functional prototype, launched it on crowdfunding. Did very, very well, and that was in 2014. Yeah, I actually brought it. This is the Beat Buddy.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is a pedal, goes on the floor.
Right.
You press it with your foot, and it's off now, so you can't really see what it does. But depending on the different things you do, so for example, when you hit it once, it does a drum fill, like it mixes it up. If you hold it down, it does a transition. You let go, and it goes to like the next beat section from like verse to chorus. Right. So that's how you could control like the movement of the drums hands-free with your foot. It's also got an SD card. You can connect it to your computer. You could put your own beats on it. It's got different drum sets, so you can play like a heavy metal beat on hand drums and vice versa and things like that. So it's a pretty sophisticated tech product. And that was the first product we came out with. And you were able to have a good commercial success.
Yeah,
that's great. Did very well. So the company that Beat Buddy is manufactured under is Singular Sound. And the idea behind the name is that this allows you to be like a one-man band as a musician. So it's your singular, your single, your singular sound. And yeah, it did very well. It won practically every major award in the music products, musical instruments industry. And it's done very well. It's still selling very, very well. And that's 8 years later.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I really, and it's near to my heart, your other invention, the Instafloss.
Yes.
Because just the process of getting ready. My wife, my son's here again, and he could tell you because it depends if you have cavities. It's like, it depends. Some of my kids, I don't have many cavities, but my kids do, and my wife has a lot of cavities too. So her process of flossing and brushing just is like this 20-minute, half hour thing process with the water picks and the flossing, because it's exhausting to keep going to the dentist. So tell us a little bit about Instafloss.
Right. So the good thing about the music industry, is that it's a passion industry. The customers who buy it, they love it, and they're very passionate. They become your evangelist if you make good products. The bad thing about the music industry is that it's a niche industry. It's only at most 10% of people would consider themselves musicians, and of those musicians, the ones who buy high-end, sophisticated music tech products is a smaller percentage. So the addressable market is not, huge, but we've had great, I'm not complaining, we've had, very good success, and I've met, amazing people. Some of my musical idols have used my products, and that's super fulfilling. People that I, listen to their music and learn to play guitar, listening to their music, are now using my products to write new music. So it's like a very fulfilling situation. But one thing that my brother and I, who helped me build the company, we always complained about is that it's so niche. There's only a limit of how far you can go with it. So we were always, we're always bouncing ideas around of, for new products, new business ideas. We're very, creative in that way. And we were hanging out at my house one day, and we were eating mango. Florida has delicious mangoes, and mango is one of our favorite fruits. But of course, the issue with mango is it gets a lot of fiber stuck in your teeth. It's very uncomfortable, and you got to get rid of it. Otherwise, it'll start rotting, and then you get gingivitis and all terrible things. So my brother asked me for floss. We went to my bathroom. I have this big mirror. We're both flossing side by side in the mirror, and and we're both complaining about how much flossing sucks. And we're thinking, if we could create a machine that could floss your teeth for you, everybody would want that, right? Because everybody...
I would.
Exactly.
I would.
Exactly. Everybody needs to floss. Yeah. Nobody likes to floss. And everybody has teeth, right? If you're lucky. So we started spitballing ideas, and eventually we came up with the idea of the Instafloss, and I actually brought... I brought our innovation here. So it's based on on a water flosser design. And the classic water flossers that have been around since the 70s is a single jet of water. It's used like a toothpick, and you have to trace the gum line, both top, bottom, and then you're supposed to also trace it on the inside, pointed outwards, and it's supposed to be, to use it properly, it has to be at a 90-degree angle to the gum. If you go to, the angle is pointing up into the gum, then it irritates the gum and is not good for you. If it's pointing down, it's not effective. It's not getting, the dirt out. So you have to be at a 90-degree angle. So there's a learning curve with water flossers, which is why most people who buy water flossers, they try it once, they make a big mess, it splatters on their mirror, and then they give up and it collects dust under their sink. So we realized that water flossers have been unchanged since the 70s. And we came up with this design, which for the people who are only listening on audio, it looks kind of like an H design, the mouthpiece. And instead of a single jet of water, there's actually 12 jets of water. There's 3 on each side of the top and 3 on each side of the bottom, so a total of 12. And you just put it in your mouth, and it shoots water, and it's because of the design, it's automatically at the correct 90-degree angle to the gum line. It's both pointing at the outwards towards your teeth,
Efficient.
and from the inside outward. So it gets both sides of the teeth, as well as the top and bottom rows, and you just put it in your mouth and you sweep it across your teeth. And so that
that's
way,
great.
it's there's no learning curve because you don't have to learn the angle. You don't have to learn to trace the gum line. You don't have to get it behind the teeth, which is super difficult, with the correct angle. So it just makes it much easier and much faster. So in just 10 seconds, you just sweep it across your teeth and all of your teeth are flossed.
I think that's great. And you have a patent on that?
Yeah, issued patent,
nice.
Utility patent.
Yeah, I instinctively that's going to be tremendous, and
thank you.
I want to wish you tremendous success on that.
Thank you.
Because that's practical.
That.
I know I'm going to buy it. My kids. I mean, it's very logical.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
It's true. We all have teeth, and if you can make it more enjoyable, I agree.
Yeah.
One thing that I got to ask you, again, being the father of 10 children, I also know that. How was that experience growing up with 8 other siblings, right? You guys are 9?
Yes,
How many
9.
boys, how many girls?
6 boys and 3 girls.
Right, so we're 8 boys, 2 girls. Did you enjoy being part of a large family?
I think as anyone who's grown up as part of a large family knows there's upsides and downsides.
Right.
The upside is that, you always have someone to play with. You're never, bored. The downside is if you don't eat fast, you don't get seconds at the dinner table, right? So,
Right.
I unfortunately picked up the bad habit of eating very quickly because of that. I try to consciously slow myself down a bit now, but I was very, very lucky that I grew up in a very loving family. My parents were great, my siblings were great. We had some fights, when we were kids, but nothing too major. And now we're all on really great terms. So I feel very, very lucky, and because of that. Having such a large family, now I work with 4 of my brothers.
That's beautiful.
So so some of them are in Singular Sound, and some of them are working in Instafloss.
That's great. And a common question I ask all guests: looking back at your life, what would you say is the number one thing that you're grateful for?
Oh, man, that is a tough question because there's so much I'm grateful for. Yeah. So it's hard to narrow it down. Wow. If I had to pick one thing I was grateful for.
It's the top.
If I had to pick one thing, I would say my family.
That's it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Because they've, I don't think I would have achieved, what I have achieved without them. It's, as I said, the takeaway I took from my War Dogs experience is it's super important to, who you work with. Yeah. And I'm very, very lucky that I have, amazing brothers who, have really supported me, in building, my business. And, they're people I can trust, 100%, and I don't have to worry about them. And they, they really care, and they, really want to make the business successful, and they're very talented and intelligent and hardworking, and there's nothing else I could ask for.
It's funny. In another interview, and I keep bringing it back to this, is the common denominator is the good family, the good where I talk about that unconditional love, right? Where you have that between siblings, between parents and children, and then people spending their adult life undoing the traumas that they had from that. So I've seen both worlds. And again, to people, I said in a different interview, people listening, again, it comes down to the unconditional love. Remember,
absolutely,
the kids are sponges. They see everything. And I like what you said before about leading by example.
Yeah.
Super important, being congruent. Your words and your actions.
Absolutely.
And they watch your actions, the kids.
Absolutely. Much more than listen to your words.
That's exactly right. So what is something, just as something I also ask all the guests, what is something that nobody knows about you?
Oof. Well, now they will know about me, huh? What is something that nobody knows about me? Oh, man. That's tough. And
you can go anywhere with it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. No preparation for this question.
Of course.
But let's see. You know, I've one thing I've realized is how much I've changed over my life. You know, when I was young, I was extremely shy and, you know, had huge stage fright. And, you know, I couldn't like speak to people I didn't know and you know, couldn't get up on stage and, you know, or like do public speaking. I was like, I just had like, you know, heart palpitations. I'd sweat, you know. And it was many, many years, and actually music helped me tremendously with this, you know, performing in front of a crowd, you know, was a huge problem for me for a very long time. But music helped me get over my stage fright and over my fear of public interaction, I would say, because when I would do a show, at least when I started out, my technique was I would just close my eyes, and I would just perform and sing and play my guitar and just do it for myself and just concentrate on the music. And eventually, I got to the point where I, you know, got comfortable, you know, doing those things and actually looking people in the eye and you know, speaking publicly and doing interviews and things of that nature. But it was not something I was born with. I
know we have Dave, our producer here, and he always says, I think, what is it, number one or number two? Number one fear is that public speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number one fear.
I've seen that.
And I remember, and the music reminded me. We had a guest, Marisha Camp, also extremely shy, and she used the camera. She used the camera as her method to literally connect with superstars. Wow. She would just go and kind of transform her persona and through that vessel, through that vehicle. Yeah. So I'm a big advocate of just, if the regular way doesn't work, like figure it out out of the box. So I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. How can people find out about you, follow you on social, get an Instafloss, right?
So yeah, I mean, if they're interested in me personally, I'm on Instagram, you know, David Packouz. I also have a YouTube channel. It's not that many videos on it, but I've got my music there. I'm also, you know, I've recorded an album, so you can, if you search my name on Spotify, you could find my original music on there. I've got a website, davidpackouz.com, which has all the links. Instafloss, which is you know, my current you know, focus and what I'm most excited about right now. They can go to instafloss.com. It's Insta, like the beginning of Instagram, and floss, like flossing your teeth.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, David. It's really what a great story. And the most important takeaway, I think, for me is the journey of life. Yes. Right? You know, all parts of it. Growing up, right? Child with a family of 9. Meets your friend, international arms dealer, right? Has a daughter at a young age. Yeah. Goes ahead and now you're an inventor on some really cool products.
Thank you.
And that's life. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I really informative, really great. And thank you so much, David, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.